So 3 years have passed since 1999, the release of The Phantom Menace, to the release of Attack of the Clones in 2002. However, Star Wars was everywhere. We had so much material. It was a amazing time to be a Star Wars expanded universe fan and Star Wars fan overall, because there was so much to consume and we had to catch up if we wanted to go ahead and enjoy as much as we could. So there was novels, there was comics, there was video games, there was so much in that era, as you can imagine. The prequel era. On the novel side of things, before I discuss how the novels and the comics enhanced the experience of Attack of the Clones and that storyline, on the Del Rey side, they were focusing, understandably, on their campaign of the space opera New Jedi Order, as they should have been, because that was an amazing story. However, during those years of the release of Attack of the Clones, the New Jedi Order was still being published and being released, I'm told. But they still gave us some novels. The first one I'll discuss briefly is Rogue Planet by Greg Bear, which in the timeline, Anakin was roughly about 13, so it takes place about 3 years after The Phantom Menace. So in that novel, Rogue Planet, Anakin and Obi-Wan, once again, we see that relationship and how they get along and how they complement each other. They go to a world called Zenoma Sekot, which is a world that is later extremely important later on in the Legends timeline during New Jedi Order. So they go on a mission to investigate there. We get a preview, which is so cool, of the main antagonist from New Jedi Order. They're not mentioned by name, but we do get a description, so we know what they're talking about. So that's one of the things, once again, that I geek out on, that I love about Legends, how it references future events, past events, and how everything connects. So that's a really, really cool mission and story that complements Attack of the Clones, because by the time we see Attack of the Clones, these stories really touch us and we really feel that relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan. When we see that opening shot of in Attack of the Clones, when we first see Anakin and Obi-Wan in that elevator, we know the relationship already between them, how they get along, what they've been through, which is what Star Wars Legends is pretty much all about in this era, for sure. When they start joking about how how Anakin saved Obi-Wan on this mission, we know what they're talking about in that elevator because of Star Wars Legends Expanded Universe, which is amazing. That's what I mean about how Legends EU enhances the movies and complements them, for sure. The young adult novels, I think we got most during this era of content. The young adult novels, Jedi Quest, which focuses on a young Anakin, and the timeline is between about Anakin was about 13 years old from the first book of Jedi Quest young adult series novels till he was 18. So it stops, that series ends a year before Attack of the Clones, roughly. So we see a lot of growth during this tender age of Anakin and the relationship and the missions between him and Obi-Wan and everything they go through. Another book that really enhances the experience of Attack of the Clones is Outbound Flight, which is, I feel, underrated book, 'cause I enjoyed it. It takes place when Anakin was about 14 years old, if I'm not mistaken, and it has a lot of references to, even the title itself should sound familiar if you've read the Thrawn trilogy, Outbound Flight. And we see that mission of Outbound Flight that's mentioned in the Thrawn trilogy, which takes place decades later in the Legends timeline. And Jorah Sabayoth and his appearance, and it's just such a cool book. And once again, it's a mission of Anakin and Obi-Wan. Besides the Jedi Quest young adult novels, there was a Jedi Quest miniseries as well of Dark Horse Comics, which once again we see further adventures during this age of Anakin being a teenager. Approaching Storm is another novel that takes place right before Attack of the Clones, and they're joined by Luminara and Barriss Offee, which we see in Attack of the Clones. It's a great. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a great book. I feel that the purpose of these books was, to give us a cool adventure, but to show us that the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan. I keep saying that because, as we know, as fans of this saga of these 6 movies, it's important. It's extremely important, especially when we get to episode 3, because we've seen all this history between these 2 characters. So there's a lot of build-up. There's a lot of important events that happen. For example, during that Jedi Quest series, we see Anakin going to Ilum. Ilum should sound familiar because it's referenced, or it's shown in the Clone Wars cartoon, the animated series as well. He gets his lightsaber. He builds his lightsaber. So a lot of important events that happen. So once again, or another series I forgot to mention that complements Attack of the Clones is the Boba Fett, the young adult series. That I feel all these are essential. They really are, and I highly recommend it, because when you see Attack of the Clones, you see it with different eyes, because you've had all these stories and all this build up, and you really care for these characters a lot more. So the first book of Boba Fett young adult novel, it's Attack of the Clones, that the events of Attack of the Clones, but through Boba Fett's eyes, through his experience. And then the later books, I think there are about 6 books. It's Boba Fett and following his career as a bounty hunter and building that, and him following Aura Singh. So just a lot of cool events that really lead up to Attack of the Clones. And we see events that happen afterwards. So obviously, besides all this, we know that the Clone Wars campaign, the comics, the novels, there's so much, there's a lot more in Star Wars EU of Clone Wars that really complement and enhance totally Attack of the Clones. But I'm not going to cover it today, because I feel that should be a video on its own, because it really equally complements episode 2 and episode 3.